So let's talk about two shows that we're super obsessed with right now because we do love to watch our shows. And Rusk and I watch TV together. Like if there's a show and we're watching it together, we have like a commitment to not watch it until we're watching it together. The thing about that is Rusk loves to do spoilers. He spoils shows for me all the time. So I always say, stop, do not spoil it for me, and just wait until I'm around to watch the show.
I'm going to piss off a lot of people by saying this. I always think it's childish. Just tell me how it ends. No, don't tell me how it ends. I know I'm pissing off a lot. They're all rolling their eyes now. That's the whole point of watching the show.
You ruined the experience.
You're being such a curmudgeon, I'm going to still watch the show, and I can compartmentalize it in my head that I pretend that I don't know. I know that's kind of weird.
No, but you still ruin it.
But if somebody watched the show and tell me how it ends.
All right, first show that we're obsessed with.
I think I just like aggravating people doing that. Just watch
their face. You do like aggravating people. First show we're obsessed with is Succession. Oh my God, that show is so freaking good. It's on HBO. It's a weekly show. It's not something you can binge. So you do have to wait on that. My favorite thing about the show is the music. I think the music is like so amazing. I love it. Anyways.
The intro music.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's an amazing show. I personally think that season 4 is the best season so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's finally got to the succession part. And for those that, haven't watched the show yet or haven't seen it, spoiler alert, the father dies and now there's a succession. See, I couldn't help myself.
I'm stuck here. I couldn't avoid it.
Spoiling it for everyone.
It's fine.
No, it's amazing though. But I think
this
that
show is
it
so
is.
good.
It's amazing, and I think that it does a fantastic job of portraying a world that most of us mortals, like you and I, Alicia, live in a very, even keel world where it's kind of, an even pace all the time. But these folks in this stratosphere of wealth, this stratosphere of celebrity, this stratosphere of attention, is that they are not necessarily the same kinds of people as we are.
Right.
They are very
No, they're not.
They are very insular. They are very narcissistic. They are very arrogant. They're
consumed by money.
They're consumed by money.
Like every little thing, it's about money.
And the second half of that entire show is that they're always trying to get their father's approval.
Yeah. Right.
And they're striving for that father, and the father's playing these mind games with his 3 kids and who's going to succeed him, who's not going to succeed. He's taking an old school way of running a business to a newer generation that doesn't have the backbone to take on that business of what started the business at the beginning, because it's that old saying that is, hard times create great people.
Mm-hmm.
Great people create great times, and then great times create soft people, and then soft people create hard times. And this is kind of in between, where you're seeing softer people creating hard times. They're about to drive this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate into the ground because they weren't there at the beginning to build it.
And I think that goes back to the idea of like super filthy rich people, like the Gates, the Amazon person, what is his Bezos, the Murdochs, like that. I think it's based on the Murdochs.
This is based on the Murdochs. So yes, it's loosely based on the Murdochs.
One of the topics that keeps popping up, it's like, how do you raise your kids to be humble and hungry when they have everything at their fingertips?
Absolutely.
They have everything. These kids are so spoiled. They have the best accommodations. They fly private. They have the first class service anywhere they go. How do they freaking manage? They don't, because they don't learn the basics of the business. And I think their dad knew that when he said, "You are not serious people."
Right.
And I think that is such an important point to talk about in this show, that as much as we want to teach our kids the values of hard work ethic, loyalty, and having some sort of integrity, it gets lost when it's not your business and you're inheriting it.
Absolutely.
I think that's the key.
I think that's a question that a lot of parents
Huge
wrestle with
question.
that are well-to-do, that are wealthy parents, is trying to balance the value of a hard work ethic, but at the same time not overly provide. And I think Warren Buffett said it the best, where he said, I'm going to leave enough for my kids to do something, but not enough for them to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I
love
think
that quote.
Yeah, and so I think that's as on paper that sounds great, and I think it probably can be executed if it's practiced that way. And I think with Warren Buffett, to a certain extent, for example, he drives old cars.
Yeah.
He still lives in the same house. 19.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure he has multiple homes, but when he was interviewed and you saw his kids, they were
Grounded.
Kids, they were grounded.
Mm-hmm.
They were kids that were learned. They were not kids that were very materialistic.
No,
it was more
no,
about
no,
the
no, no, no.
experience than it was about
Mm-hmm.
the material wealth. And I think this show does a fantastic job of trying to cut through that, at the same time trying to teach his kids to be competitive, to be cutthroat, because in that world it's all cutthroat. There's no emotions. There's no there's no I have to think twice about things. You got to stay on top of the business. And now we're seeing in this particular
So true.
final episodes
Right.
how the kids are kind of driving into the ground. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, no. And I think it's because a lot of it was just given to them. They didn't have to work so hard for it. And now that the business is theirs, they don't know how to conduct themselves in business. And they fire people, they hire people,
Right.
they don't know how to negotiate. They don't have a clue about what
They
they're
make
doing.
a lot of haphazard decisions without thinking it.
Right. Next show we want to talk
Regardless of
about.
the consequence.
The next show that I want us to talk about is a new show that we just started watching. It's called The
Drops of God.
The Drops of God.
So
And it's a little bit of a wine connoisseur, maybe. Cheers.
have you seen it, Jamal?
Based off of that.
Yes, it is.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It
So
is. It's
Oh,
based
I
on a
didn't know
Japanese
that.
comic, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Really well
Okay.
done.
Yep. And so they finally turned it into a screen. They adapted it into
And that's happening a lot more, right? That's like The Last of Us was a game show. Was
Yeah.
a game, right?
video game.
A video game, right? A video game. This show is so good.
Yes.
Is it Japanese?
It's Japanese, yeah. I mean, you're watching it, right? It's Japanese.
I don't know. If
The
it's
problem is
Japanese.
that show makes you want to drink
I
wine.
thought it was French.
Yeah. Well, it just, it's French and Japanese, right? It's a combination of both. You're right about that. It's a show based on a father that was a wine connoisseur that had acquired the largest wine collection in the world that was valued or appraised at $148 million. And he was on his deathbed, and he had taught his daughter when she was in her youth to be able to blind taste flavors.
Babe, not in her youth, in her
youth.
childhood.
Yeah, okay, in her childhood.
She was 8 years old when
Okay,
she
childhood,
learned
right.
all of these things.
And so in her childhood, she was taught how to pick up on certain flavors that are consistently found in both red wines and white wines.
Yeah.
But then they had a falling out. He wasn't a very good father. He moved, and he was on his deathbed, and then on his deathbed he leaves a will. And this is where the story gets interesting. Is that while he was living in Japan and collecting this fortune of wine, he had a protege, a Japanese student, that was the best at blind tasting wines.
Yeah.
And we're not talking just identifying a grape like I can. We're talking about identifying a region, an estate, and a vintage, which is, for the gods. There's only a handful of people on this planet that can do it consistently. There's 200.
And he does it by smell.
He does most
of it by smell,
most by
right?
smell. And obviously he tastes a little bit too.
A little, yeah.
But, for example, like me, I have to taste it several times just to identify the grape. He takes a little sip of it and then spits it out and doesn't think twice about it, can identify a grape. He can identify the vintage and the estate.
That is such an
Right.
amazing ability.
Right. And so then then the daughter comes into the play. They show up at the will, and they show up at the probate situation for the will. And the daughter discovers that if she wants to inherit this $148 million collection of wine, she has to identify one particular wine and she has 30 days to do it. And she has not been practicing wine for 10 or 15 years. Actually, she has a psychosomatic disorder.
She has a psychosomatic. She has trauma.
She has trauma.
She has trauma
from her childhood.
From her childhood and like early tastings that her dad used to force her through. And she didn't want to do that. But she comes back like in a way to kind of like take to revenge that trauma that she experienced as a young girl. And this show is so, it's on Apple.
It's on Apple, yes.
It's on Apple. It's such a great, amazing show. And I think you will be amazed at how connected we all are throughout the world in terms of wine. Like from Japan to France to America, just so many connections and how we all are interconnected based on like certain things that we enjoy.
Fantastic show. We highly recommend it if you have some time. Watch it. And do you want me to give the spoiler? Tell everybody?
No, don't tell anybody anything.
What kind of wine it was?
No, don't. People want to watch. All right, let's talk about the last thing that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about the...
Jamal said no to. So I was out.
No.
Sorry.
We need to listen to Jamal. He's our producer.
I know there's a few folks out there that have described to my mentality of just tell me how it ends. I'm going to watch it.
No. Okay. Last thing we're talking about today. I'm posing the question. Are we interested in the coronation that's happening in England this weekend? May 6th, King Charles is going to be coronated as King of England, the leader of the Anglican Church.
Well, I'm gonna say yes. And
are you interested in it?
For multiple reasons.
Oh my gosh, I'm shocked.
For very selfish, narcissistic reasons.
What?
He's getting coronated on my birthday.
Babe, but you don't celebrate your birthday, remember?
Yeah, well, I mean, celebration's relative, but it'll be easy to remember.
You don't care about your birthday.
Number two, I've always been a history buff. I'm a little bit of an armchair historian. I've read tons and tons of books over 25 years on history, so I appreciate the historical value of this coronation.
Gotcha.
Right? And what it kind of represents. I do understand that I think a little bit over 50% of Brits are in support of his coronation. I think
really that many?
Right. It's a little bit over 50%. And I think it's obviously the older generation, the ones that has a little bit ties to Queen Elizabeth. People? No, I wouldn't say Brexit people. I just think it's an older generation that, for sure, the Brexit. But I think that even in the middle of the road, I think that the generation of the early Gen Xers and maybe the baby boomers that have natural affinity to nationalism. And I think that they see it not necessarily as they don't like the individual. Maybe they do like the individual. I think they just respect the institution and what it stood for in their history. Same way as we do with founding fathers. We have respect for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison for being learned men at that time, regardless of all the many flaws they had with slavery.
No, they established
the establishment, but they lived in a time, and that was part of the time back then. Of course, you can't take people, put them into presentism.
Present time.
No, presentism. That's a word.
Oh.
Where if you were to fast forward, if you were to bring those people into the future and expect them to be the same, no, because society and environment and nature kind of change gives. You wouldn't expect George Washington today to be, pro-slavery, but back then that was at that time. So I don't.
Okay, but what about those people that have a struggle with the monarchy at this day and age in 2023?
They have a struggle with the monarchy because, to me personally, I think it's economic. I think that, for example, in this particular situation, Brexit didn't pan out to be what they thought it was going to be.
Okay.
There's excessive high inflation, but more importantly, there's a higher unemployment in the UK because of this, because of Brexit. And for taxpayer money to be spending the coronation at this time, from an optic standpoint, it's just bad timing. And they did ask the King Charles to postpone it, but when are you going to postpone it? When is the unemployment rate?
No, it's never going to be. It's never going to be a good time. There's never going to be a good time.
So I don't think that majority of the folks that are against it are necessarily against the tradition. I think it's just bad timing for them because of their own personal circumstances. I think that they don't necessarily like it that the coronation's happening now at this particular time. It's like, for example, if you were living in the Great Depression and you had the President of the United States taking limousine rides and living on Hawaii and some second home or something. It's bad optics. And it's just not a good idea because you're supposed to be representation of the people. Do people like King Charles? That's a personal preference, right?
Yeah. So that's where I want to kind of jump in because I think there is a sense of like, he's not a very popular guy. The other thing is Camilla, the queen consort, is not a popular person. There is still lingering emotions about Diana.
Absolutely.
There's still lingering emotions about Harry leaving Britain with Meghan. I think there's a sense of like, why is this still in existence? Why is the monarchy still in existence in 2023? Right. So there's feelings about that. There's feelings about the imperial nature of Britain with other countries. They're going to be exposing a lot of the jewels that they have, a lot of the riches that they have, which were exploited from poor countries or poor continents like Africa, India. A lot of those things were not taken legally. They were exploited and they were taken illegally. And so there's a lot of resentment behind all of that. And I think the people are kind of thinking, I think we're fed up with this. I think we don't need to do any more of this. I get it. It's a traditional thing. There's something to that. But I think the younger generation of people are fed up with the status quo. I think they're done with thinking that that England will always be sort of that imperial leader of the world. And I think they're done with that. I think they're freaking done with that. And I don't know. I'm not sure where this leads in the future, but I think those are some of the thoughts that are coming up.
No, I think you nailed it on the head. I don't think it's just England with the younger generation. I think younger generations in most of the Western world,
of course,
are kind of fed up with their status quo. We see that here in the States, and they obviously don't have a connection to history. They don't have a connection to nationalism. Part of it is the social media that
it does. It drives a lot of those emotions.
It drives a lot of emotions, but it also keeps them disconnected from reading stuff that we had to read because we didn't have social media back then. So we were kind of stuck into the books, whether you were an avid reader or not avid reader. You learned a little bit about the history.
But let me ask you this. I think social media brings a lot of conversations about that normally people wouldn't be having.
Absolutely. It has positive benefits. I think the more interesting question is not that what's happening now with King Charles. That's going to happen. He's 73. We may give him another 10 to 15 years while he sits on the throne. Question is, will his son, Prince William, decide that he wants to maintain monarchy or just completely dissolve it? And it's complicating because you can't just say, I'm going to step aside and not be coronation. There's a lot of assets that would have to be reconfigured because they're tied into the British government and the taxes and the money that the monarchy brings for tax revenue for the country. So it's not easy, but I think that Prince William might be the one that says, I'm going to maintain the title, but I don't need the coronation.
I think William will be that person?
William, yes, right. I'm sorry, did I say Harry?
No, William, you said William. No,
but Harry doesn't count.
Harry.
I think William.
No, Harry
I know William has traditional.
Has left the room.
Right, he has left the room. I think William does maintain some of the traditional values, but I think he's going to take a hybrid approach. I think there's going to be something in between. We realize that this is no longer necessary.
I'm interested to see what's going to happen on Saturday. I really am interested to see how far they're going to take it.
I think you're going to see millions of people show up.
Yeah.
They all talk about how they don't want it, but I think people are still going to watch it show up anyway.
I know. And I think ultimately they're going to show up because it really is they make it a big affair. It's the pomp and circumstance. There is such a huge thing that happens around it. But honestly, I really feel like King Charles isn't beloved like Queen Elizabeth was. I don't think he's beloved in that way. I don't think they see him in that way. I think the ghost of Diana is still around. I think she's still sort of dictates a lot. And I think it has to do a lot with the show The Crown, because a lot of people are realizing and remembering, even young people that didn't know a lot about Diana, who died in 1997 when I was a senior in college when she died. And I remember that day, and I remember driving somewhere and listening to this thing that happened and her death and her accident and all of that. And it's still in my mind. I still remember where I was when she passed, because she was such a beloved figure, and she was beloved because she was a girl of the people, and she embraced the people, and she said, "Screw you, stupid royalty. I don't want you. I don't want to know anything about you. I am my own woman." And I think that appeals to a lot of women. I think we'll always remember the day Diana died.
Right. She was definitely.
And Harry is her son, and Harry is someone that has said 1,000 times he does not want the same fate for Meghan, who is also someone that's always pursued in the media in Britain. That's why they had to leave. And honestly, for me, if I don't watch it on Saturday, I don't really care.
I'm going to watch it.
If I don't watch it.
It's on my birthday. No,
I'm not a royalist. I'm not a monarch person. If I watch it, it's to watch the fashion. To be honest, it's
you're
just
gonna have
fashion.
your own selfish, narcissistic reasons.
Yeah. If I watch it, it's for that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the coronation of Charles, because I don't really give a shit about him. But it really will be about what's everybody wearing and how are.
Sure.
How is that?
Yeah, you can watch it. There's not one right. There's not one reason why you can.
Right.
I'm going to watch it for the historical value of it. I love Roman history, and I love the medieval times, and I think this is, the English monarchy started in the 9th century under King Alfred, and I'm a big fan of English history and French history during the medieval times. That's obviously where wine kind of got its origin of the wine that we know today, so it kind of overlaps with that, and not to get off a tangent, but I'm going to watch it for the historical standpoint. You don't always have to agree with the individual. You don't always agree with everything that everybody does all the time. Wives and husbands, you and I don't always agree, but we get along, and I know it's kind of an oversimplified way to look at it, but I also do know that sometimes when we are looking from the outside in, for public figures, there's always a lot on the inside that we don't know.
There is. All right. Let us know. Are you interested in the coronation? Is it something that you watched? Is it something that you are interested in? Is it something that appeals to you? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? All right. So this is our episode. Honey, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for the invite. Cleared up my allergies. I got more to say about Instagram posts.
Oh, God. All right, Jamal, let's make a note of that. Rusk wants more about Instagram. You know what? He goes on Instagram because he doesn't have an Instagram account. So he goes on mine. He's so freaking nosy and so many things to say about people who post on Instagram. Anyways, thank you so much for listening today. It is a new season. It's season 10. We're so excited to share this one with you. It is more balls to the wall. There are no prescribed interviews this season. Just let us know if this is something that appeals to you. And if you want us to go back to the interviews, we are happy to do that as well. It is your show. Whatever you want to hear, whatever you want to know. Thank you so much.